upon a time.
One of the things that always impressed Rita and I about David was, well, actually a couple of things. But first was his comfort in his own skin. He was a very self-confident guy. Rita reminded me recently of, well, I think maybe our first dinner as a foursome. We went to Fandango, and David brought his oxygen machine. And he sat down and he set the machine beside him, and a lot of people would be a little uncomfortable having to drag that thing around with him. But David's attitude was, am I the only one that brought my oxygen machine? But he was also a very kind man, which manifested itself in so many ways. And we, for one, will miss him a lot. He was a great neighbor, and we wish he were still with us.
Thank you.
He made a mean margarita. I don't know if any of you ever had one of David's
I don't think I had a margarita from him.
Oh, it was a killer.
Really?
It was, and I think Stephanie has gone ahead and taken that recipe. I haven't had a chance to get the recipe yet. I don't
Because
think
of your
they give
time,
it out.
it was because of your time in Santa Fe?
Yeah. David was a gracious man, very strong, never complained. And like Gary said, he was just an excellent neighbor, man of courage.
Thank you, Rita and Gary. Thank you.
Boy, do I ever wish I didn't have to follow that.
Are you number two? What's that number?
And because I talk too much, I wrote mine out so I wouldn't talk too much. So when years ago, 4 First of America couples bought George Nugent's family cottage or cabin on the Pear Marquette. And for Tom and me, who like to sit, read, take naps, talk, it was great to be involved with these people because these people were workers. Dean and Maureen Williams were long experienced at having a seasonal cottage. And Maureen led us in flipping the mattresses, airing them out, opening up all the hide-a-beds and rollaways because she knew there were mouse nests in all of those, and there were, with live baby mice all over the place. And that's the first thing we had to do before we could even sleep that first night, was get all the bedding straightened out. And Dick and Marion Klein had these 3 capable sons that they dragged out of their elegant Grand Avenue home and took them for a long weekend that first summer, a workshop where the guys polished all the wood furniture in the house and took the rattan and caned furniture out on the grass and repaired it and restained it, left it out there to dry. This was Dick's idea of fun. And what about David?
There's the German in him.
David didn't say much. He looked around the rooms of the main cabin and of the guest house and saw immediately that there was extra worn upholstered furniture that we did not need. He said, let's get rid of it. And Stephanie and I dragged all this extra stuff out to the gravel road where scroungers picked it up immediately. Didn't have to sell it or dump it or anything. And he kept looking around. He rearranged the seating areas in the main cabin. Knew that he had them at home, and he used what was in the cabin. He hung fish and birds on the walls and talked us women who were going to change the draperies into keeping them because they were good quality drapes with fishing and hunting scenes on them. And then he started scrounging around in cupboards and sheds and found vintage stuff to bring out and decorate. He used a porcelain chamber pot as a doorstop. And when he got up on a step stool and hung this vintage fishing creel on the wall over the fireplace, it was like we were in home and garden, and we were home because of David's artist eye.
Everybody had.
That's cool.
Everybody, all the 4 couples had something that they contributed.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
What a
it
neat
worked out
awesome.
beautifully.
Do you still have that place?
No.
Oh, no.
We had it about 10 years, I think.
The neighbor got to be a problem.
Oh,
Yeah, he was a shooter.
Oh, you know those neighborhoods. I know.
Yeah. This guy liked to shoot. He liked to shoot the. He
Couldn't
liked
walk
to shoot the
across his
fish.
property anymore. He put up a
He
lot.
shoot the spawning salmon so that he could
Oh, that's,
take the eggs and
I would've
dump
called
dump the
DNR.
fish.
He shot
we were afraid of him
Yeah.
because
Oh, afraid of
there
him
were
was-
guns going off all the time.
Oh, he's one of those.
So we.
You never knew if he was gonna.
All right, who's number 3?
what a nice story.
All right, Marion.
Well, you were talking about David being comfortable in his own skin, and he certainly was that. He was an optimist. He was always an optimist. I heard him many times, and I can't give you all of the instances, but you'd say, well, what about so-and-so? No, it'll work out all right. It's gonna be okay. It's fine. He was definitely an optimist. But the other things that I remember about him was many times we had visited in Santa Fe with Stephanie and David, and we took road trips. And one of the road trips was to the foundry of Alan Hauser, who is a sculptor. And I fell in love with a small sculpture that was in the gift shop, and it was 2 Indian women with their blankets over their heads, and it's very small, and they're facing each other, and their faces are not distinct because they're shrouded, and it's called Night Talk, and the 2 women talking at night. It reminded me of all the times I've sat with some of these ladies talking at night. And but anyway, he had a marvelous eye for objects that intrigued him that were actually extremely beautiful. Something like that. But the rugs and things, and Stephanie has a hand in this, I know. But you work together well.
Yeah.
That's another good memory that I have of how well Stephanie and David complemented each other.
How many
That
years
was-
were you guys married?
46.
46?
46.
Ah.
Doesn't seem possible.
I also remember when you and David came to our house shortly after you were married. And we had dinner.
Big dinner.
A big dinner. It was a big
The
dinner.
acceptance dinner.
Sort of an acceptance
Acceptance.
dinner. Yes.
Acceptance dinner.
Partly because this was a second marriage for both of them, and we're talking about close to 50 years ago. The attitudes, especially at the bank,
Yeah, I had
were
to
of that
be accepted.
nature that you just didn't do that sort of thing, and indeed they did. And so we had the CEO of the bank.
We had a big
Jim,
dinner.
Jim Duncan and Colleen, and we had the Adams.
Yeah.
And who else did we have? Maybe that was it.
The Duncans? Adams?
Is there anybody? Who else? Yeah, that could
It was
have been
wonderful.
But anyway, it was sort of this is acceptance.
Did she pass?
She passed.
Apparently.
No, she's still on
She
trial.
passed.
46
It
years.
was acceptable. It was okay. Everything was all right.
Well, thank you, Marianne. Thank you for having that dinner that night.
That was a fun dinner.
Who's number, is it 4? Me.
Judy? Yeah. The one thing that to me stands out above all else is Kimmy and the melding of two families, how they did it. I have told people for 46 years how amazed I am that David and Stephanie could bring together 4 kids and have them a family.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is probably the biggest accomplishment David ever and Stephanie ever had. But David always, we argued golf all the time, and he would always tell me I'm wrong. And if I liked a certain player, he would say, well, you can't like him. So that was always an ongoing thing with David and I. But then, the memories that I have of all of our years of traveling together, being invited to Loch Lomond for 3 times was just heaven on earth with David and Stephanie. And Dan loved it. He loved the fishing. He loved the golf. He just loved all of it. And that was so generous of them to always ask us to come. And we love you for that.
Is it 6?
5.
But
This guy.
I brought some notes along. I won't go over all of these single-spaced notes, but they're notes from a trip that we took with Stephanie and Dave to Scotland
To Scotland.
a few years ago, quite a few years ago, and we had such a great time. Dave and Stephanie showed us everything about what they love about Scotland, and we enjoyed our stay there at Loch Lomond, and we had a road trip, and Dave was the designated driver, so he brought us all around Scotland, and we had such a wonderful time, and so many memories formed there that I just can't begin to tell you all of them. But the one memory that doesn't have anything at all to do with Scotland is that my I think association with First of America started with Dave. Dave and I were golfers at one time. He was obviously a much better golfer than I was and am. But we were playing in a Kalamazoo Personnel Association golf outing. And I think, I may be wrong about this, but who was the guy that lived over at Park 4 Circle who tipped the cart over? Hall. Yeah, so anyhow, I think I got this right. Dave and I came up to him, got some first aid going for him after he had flipped his golf cart over, and everything turned out fine.
Oh, boy.
But it was just such a pleasure to get to know Dave and enjoy all of our time together with Dave and Stephanie, and all the good times we had together. And maybe you have some more you want to talk about.
I just have 2 thoughts. One is shortly after we joined the bank, we got into golf a little bit. We had not been golfers, we were voters before. And I can remember playing in a twilight with Steph and Dave, and we hit a ball and we were behind a tall tree. And I looked at Dave and I said, oh my God, what are you gonna do? And very confidently says, well, I'm just gonna go over it. And sure enough, he swung, went over the tree, and landed on the green.
I know. And all he had to do was say, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that means a lot is in the last few years when we knew Dave had health problems and we'd get together and have a good time, but when we would leave, he would always say, love you, which I thought was really neat. I think he realized how precious love was. And I think sometimes we all think that, but we don't say it, but he would always tell us he loved us.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
6?
Yeah.
Okay, I have 6, and
And
it's
6
amazing to me.
stories.
It's amazing to me how similar these stories are,
Yeah.
because of you mentioned about love and everything else. And I met Dave for the first time 58 years ago, and that's when we went to Western Michigan University. That's where I met him, and we were both in the same fraternity. He was a fraternity brother. It was Theta Xi, and we did a lot of crazy things. course, I'm not gonna mention what they were to you.
Better not.
Not in front of Kimmy.
But
Wow.
Dave, I think, is one of my one of my best friends over the years. And all these trips that we took, I mean, the memories are fantastic. And there's many of them that, matter of fact, I just brought something to Steph that I found that Sandy put together. And there were memories there that I even had a hard time thinking about what they brought back, you know. And but Dave he was a super guy. He had a very great sense of humor, and even when we were in the fraternity, he was a jokester, and we even found time when we were in the fraternity. Once in a while, on occasion, we'd even have a beer together, and that was.
Of course.
But Dave was a super guy, best friend. He will be sadly missed, and rest in peace, David. I'll be seeing you in the future.
You will, you will.
That's it.
Steph, Tom had planned to be here, and only in the last couple hours did he not feel well, and so he didn't come. But he said if somebody wanted to know the memory he was going to speak about, he was going to talk about the time that Bill and Sandy and you and David and Tom and I were at El Faro in Santa Fe, and this was a bar that had a live band every night, and it was all different kinds of music that would play. But one night we went, and it was really a big bunch of people, and there was a fellow there who was by himself, and we were all a little kind of nervous about this guy because he kept looking at us. We think he was probably Native American. He had a prosthesis, and we thought that he might have been a veteran who had lost an arm. Anyway, in this wild dancing, we were all dancing, this guy came our way, and we women were like, oh my God. And he asked David to dance. And David didn't blink. He went out there.
You kidding?
He danced with the guy. And we were all just, Bill, we were laughing so hard. And we'd look over us, and pardon my language, but he had this shit-eating grin on his face. And it was like there was no way it was going to bother him. And he danced with the guy, and the guy thanked him. And when you think about it, he was the best dressed, best looking gringo in the whole bar. So the guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Go for the best, right?
It was that gold chain.
I don't think he did. He must have had on his fringy jacket that night.
Fringy jacket, no green jacket. Well, thank you, everybody.
We got one more.
We got
Oh,
seven.
yeah,
We're
that's
not
right.
done.
Seven, number
It's our
seven.
turn.
Seven, lucky seven.
Number seven.
Oh,
Okay, we're the Zeeks. Lori and myself live next door
on the other side of the wall
on
here.
the other side of the wall. So we call the Wirts the roof mates because
No.
we're
Roofing, okay.
you
Yeah,
know,
roof
we're
mates.
Siamese together with a duplex here, and of course, talking about good neighbors and being resourceful, Dave and Stephanie have been great neighbors. We were very lucky to have you guys as neighbors, and of course, we're stuck with them. You know, if we don't,
That's right.
we don't like them, what are you gonna do?
But
But
fortunately, that's not the case.
as time went on, you know, we guys would come over
Thank
for a
you for
drink.
clarifying.
We'd enjoy the company with you guys. And I think my one memory, as I think back, Dave and Steph were over one night, having cocktails, and they're looking back. I don't know if you noticed, there's a bird feeder we have behind our house, and I was remarking how we love to have the birds. You know, we enjoy the ambiance here and the wildlife, and Dave and I talked about that, but I said the other night, I'm sitting, you know, in the evening after midnight, I think it was, and I hear this noise, this ruckus outside. I think it was outside. I didn't think it was coming from your house, but turned out there was a raccoon climbed up the tree, you know, trying to get down into the bird feeder, and I was telling the bird feeder story to Dave, and he's like, being resourceful as he was, he says, "I know exactly what you need to do." And the next day, Dave comes over with a pellet gun. And I was like, do I really want to do? I don't have a gun, I don't have a slingshot, I don't have anything. He said, this is exactly what you need. And so, of course, a few nights later, I'm waiting for the ruckus again. Here's the stupid raccoon. And so I'm trying to figure out how to work this pellet gun. I finally figured it out. And in the middle of the night, I'm chasing the squirrel or this raccoon around with a pellet gun. But I think maybe that did the trick.
Because he thinks he got it.
He never came back.
Yeah, it's the nurse green.
So yeah, thanks for being a great neighbor. We missed Dave a lot, and we're sorry to have him.
We
go,
had
but
some fun times
We
too.
had some nice times.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, you guys.
And I can add to that.
Yes.
My one little story. So the last time we saw Steph and Dave was Christmas time. Is this where you're thinking? Anyway, let me tell my cute little story. So we were leaving like this this past Christmas. So, and I think we got together before Christmas time for a drink. I don't know. Yeah, we have. Anyway, so we've had some cocktails together, you might say, in the past. And so we had them over with a couple other neighbors, too. And anyway, we have a little Christmas cheer, and we were just chatting. We were in the living room just chatting, got to talking about restaurants, and either Dave mentions Bold or something, what's your favorite restaurant? I think that was it. And David said Bold. And I said, oh yeah, I like that restaurant. We've been there a few times, blah, blah, blah. And Barb, another neighbor across, said, I've never been there. And he goes, what? You've never been there? And Inga was there too. I don't know if Inga had ever been to Bold either. Possibly not. And again, what? And he just all night long, he was like beside himself. I can't believe you've never been to Bold. I can't believe. And again, by this time he is carrying his oxygen around with him too, and that really was the last time we saw him because we left mid-January for a month in Argentina, and they
Christmas gathering.
Yeah, that was, and you guys, and then. Yeah, so anyway, I'll never forget that. I burst out laughing every once in a while when I think about it because his reaction was he could not believe that somebody who has lived in Kalamazoo all of these years has never been to Bold.
Go there, it's a good
So
restaurant.
please, if you do not go, if you haven't been there, it is his favorite restaurant.
I know.
Trust me.
But have you been there?
Oh yeah, we have been there. Thank God. Otherwise he probably would have just walked out the door and said, "Do I know these people?"
But you never had a chance to go with David.
No, we hadn't.
No.
We hadn't. And we talked about that because I think I said, okay, in the spring, pandemic was not even on our side. We're gonna go to Bold together because I remember we were talking about that. So yeah.
Yeah,
So-
he wasn't a big one for the big smorgasbords that my husband and I like to go to.
Well, yeah, we never, I guess, yeah, no, but Bold, yeah. And, I'm trying to say, well, Bravo's a good restaurant and Food Dance and whatever. Well, they're not as good as Bold. Bold was definitely his restaurant. So, anyway,
All right.
I just get a kick out of that.
Thank you, everybody.
Here's to
Judy and
Dave.
I are gonna go get some food together.
Cheers.
To David.
Cheers to Dave.
Can I help you, Steph?
No,
I've
he
got
needs